Crossover games aren't exactly a new thing in the video game world, especially by the 2010s. We've seen things like Dissidia, PlayStation All-Stars, and most famously the most successful of them all, Super Smash Bros. Crossover titles are guaranteed to catch eyes and bring in attention, but your ability to maintain those eyes and the audience, as PlayStation All-Stars and the subject of this video would learn the hard way, is not an easy task. You have way more eyes on you. That's undeniable. But if you aren't careful, that's a whole lot of eyes on you as you stumble through development and an even shakier launch. Jump Force was another fighting game mashup that featured characters from famous animes and Japanese media products like the insanely popular and old-school Shonen Jump series and their same best-selling magazine. Released in 2019, Jump Force would feature some seriously popular characters and a 40-person roster, intense marketing, and drew tons of eyes as people waited to see what it would look like to see Yusuke fight against, say, Goku or Luffy from One Piece. Sadly, the release was anything but smooth. While the game sold well initially, that would quickly slow, and within only 2 more years, Bandai Namco would announce giving up on Jump Force entirely, with the servers having been set to shut down the next year in 2022. With a game that featured the likes of Jotaro Kujo, Seto Kaiba, Son Goku, Naruto, and Ichiko, and so much more, how is Jump Force unable to last just a couple of years? We will find out that and more on this episode of Death of a Game, a series where we investigate the largest contributing factors to the death or dying of a game or company, utilizing a timeline of events that is also full of bits of evidence, developer testimonies, and more importantly, detective intuition, all aiding in our final deduction, the moment after the mystery has been elucidated and we crack the case for good. You know, that classic detective moment in media. It's helpful, especially for anyone who missed out on any of the clues along the way. Without further delay, detectives, we have a wide range of series and characters to cover in this failed mashup fighter, Jump Force. Choose your favorite anime hero or villain, and let's get to the case. I would like to welcome this video's sponsor, Monly. Monly is a language learning platform that uses a freemium model and combines traditional lessons with innovative technology like VR and AR technology to teach a variety of languages. There's no better time than now to try out Monly too, because they are currently hosting their biggest limited time Black Friday sale, providing up to a 70% discount. Their biggest discount, by the way, for lifetime access to all languages. With access to 41 languages and 33 native languages, Monly can combine for a total of 1,320 language combinations, with real conversations with the Monly chatbot that can provide you with real-time feedback. But don't take my word for it, it's been downloaded by like 125 million people and is a top 5 language learning app worldwide. Make sure to check out the link in the description or on screen, and you can get access to this huge Black Friday sale of 70% on your lifetime access to Monly. Thank you for sponsoring this video, Monly, and thank you for the support, detectives. Back to the case. The story begins quite far back, with the minting of a new shonen manga anthology in 1968. This series, known as the Shukan Shonen Jumpu, or in English, the Weekly Jump series, are also known as Shonen Jump Weekly, was a weekly shonen manga magazine that would eventually become the largest comic and manga magazine ever, selling 7.5 billion plus copies. With many more spin-offs to come, Weekly Shonen Jump has become a household name in Japan for decades. While there would be a few games set in the same universe coming in the early 2000s mostly, this was more so a sign that the print media had been slowing down, and new digital titles for Shonen Jump, unfortunately, hadn't impressed enough to make a resurgence there. The first crossover game that was quite major was J-Star's Victory Versus, which released in 2014 and sold 110,000 units in just a few days. That was probably a big inspiration for what would become the next crossover fighting game for the Shonen series, but a new yet even more ambitious one too. J-Star's Victory Versus should look pretty familiar for those who play Jump Force or are watching the gameplay play throughout this video, with the main differences being that it had even worse combat and a more traditional anime-style visual scheme that many would prefer or preferred. They would later create the Shonen Jump and Manga Plus app, maintaining some level of relevance there, but Shonen Jump as a whole hadn't kept growing in the same direction as some other old-school IPs like Digimon or Pokemon, or I'm sure many others that are older, and wouldn't have the same level of popularity internationally, making it quite a time capsule of media for Japan. Now this might seem a little off topic, and perhaps it is, but I will explain why it's relevant shortly. Bandai Namco, who is quite prolific in the fighting game world, especially with anime fighters, would put out one of their most successful anime fighters yet, Dragon Ball Z Xenoverse. This title would sell a respectable 5.5 million copies and would lead the way for many more DBZ titles, including more in the same series. The reason I mention it, besides just it having the same publisher, is actually because the biggest comparisons to what would later become known as Jump Force was DBZ Xenoverse as a series. Many felt that it was a sign that perhaps they utilized some of the same base for what would become Jump Force, with both being very similar in basic gameplay like the skill system and visuals. But we don't know exactly, but we do know that trying to shed the comparisons was going to be impossible. Jump Force would be first announced to the world as early as June 10th, 2018, and a ton of details would be released alongside the announcement. Jump Force, as the game would be known, was a fighting action game powered by the Unreal Engine 4, and developed to commemorate Weekly Jump's 50th anniversary. Playable on all platforms besides the Switch yet, and set to release in the next year, in 2019. Jump Force would be developed by Spike Chunsoft, a Japanese developer who largely specialized in localized content, but was also known for developing 5 installments in the Dragon Quest series as well as the Zero Escape series and more. But although they had a long storied history in game development as a whole, including anime games, they had very little actual fighting game experience. Sure, they made J-Star's Victory Versus, but that game, besides the visuals and authenticity and presentation, including when later compared to Jump Force even, wasn't really highly regarded or well remembered besides. I think that Bandai Namco was a bit too confident with their ability to publish a fighting game versus develop one, or have someone in charge who knows how. It also probably explains the drag-and-dropness of their game engine sometimes whenever you play different anime fighters and they feel so similar. But anyway, Jump Force was set to be, for the first time ever, all the classic manga heroes thrown into a whole new world. That was set to be the real world. The reason this made sense logically was because by utilizing one recognizable world, it would allow for them to more easily synergize a bunch of different characters with different art styles. This, however, would then mean that the realism was a big theme in Jump Force, despite being an animated game featuring an animated character cast, which was certainly interesting. Some major characters were announced early on as well, featuring Goku and Frieza from DBZ, or Dragon Ball Z, and Naruto and Sasuke from Naruto. Then we got Luffy and Zoro from One Piece. These were some heavy hitters and characters quite known for their unique fighting styles as well. Alongside an announcement trailer at E3 would be early gameplay footage showcased there as well. What was shown in the gameplay was impressive, at least visually. There was clearly a lot of effort put into the special moves and effects in the game. Each character looked unique enough too, when fighting and displaying their own special moves. With knockback transitions into objects on the map and a slew of other special abilities like teleporting and more, the visuals in Jump Force made the game look quite pretty. The thing is, fighting games are notoriously good at looking good in trailers and playing completely different to them, especially anime fighters, which are a subgenre of fighting games that are usually associated with being more gimmicky in gameplay and less serious fighting game entries, more so relying on name recognition and single-player efforts. Jump Force was looking good and early, but how it would play could be very different to that. More characters would be revealed in September 2018, including Yusuke and Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho, which is actually one of my personal favorite animes, and Killua and Kurapika from Hunter x Hunter, though I know fans will get mad that I pronounced the X. There were some goodies promised to those who would also pre-order the game too, including a new lobby vehicle and 3 costumes. Jump Force would first launch in Japan just a day before, which isn't surprising for a Japanese-developed game. But within one more day and the game would have its worldwide release, February 15th, 2019. According to aggregate review website Metacritic, Jump Force would score a drastically low 56 out of 100 from 64 different critics and lower from users. Jump Force would have good early sales, primarily led by the PlayStation platform and in Japan, selling a few 100,000 copies quite quickly. Controversially, however, was the inclusion of DLC, which would roll out from launch up to the summer of 2019 the same year. This would cost $30 on top of a full-price game in Jump Force at $60, meaning that if you wanted your DLC later on, you then had to buy a season pass on top of your already full-priced game. Jump Force was already early on proving to be quite expensive. GameSpot, who reviewed the game and scored it a 7 out of 10, would state that the game had some positives though, such as the unique fighting styles to each character and the character customization being quite robust, and, well, they enjoyed the combat. While not liking the generic and bland story complete with slideshow-esque cutscenes and Sonic 2006 level cinematics, which, to be fair to Sonic 2006, this is 2019, and in this game, the cutscenes are no better than Sonic. They're just looking at characters and they sigh and every now and then say something. It's really awkward and totally takes out any of the buzz that could be generated in the lackluster story. IGN, on the other hand, rated the game slightly lower at a 6.3 out of 10, and they would put a bow on their review stating that Jump Force was all flash and just little substance. So let's dive into the story, by the way. It's about a random civilian who, somehow being turned super by whatever was going on in the calamity that was occurring, was then resurrected by Trunks. You then get to choose your team, which houses different characters and skill sets. The story then consists of missions, and some being story-based. Only 9 of which are story-based, by the way, with tons of filler in between. Think like Inuyasha levels. These missions are found in the hub zone, just like Xenoverse. The problem being you're stuck loading into these missions, which can take incredibly long in the game, and the payoff in writing in the story is just not worth it, because most of it is just watching characters stand there without talking and text appearing on the screen, which is like Dynasty Warriors from 2005 level story, and even when they are animated, the animations are really bad and most characters just keep the exact same face and look, most featuring an angry, never-changing face. Something not really fitting when many of these characters are known for their expressions and emotion, like Luffy or Goku, two characters that are known for being funny even if unintentionally. 40 characters was impressive for a fighting game though, even for a crossover one. But how on earth could you balance a game that had 40 characters? Well, you don't always need to overly focus on balance, in my opinion, but then you end up having to cut your audience size down a bit, as typically the more gimmicky fighter games or less balanced ones are the less popular ones, at least historically. Hell, even games like Dragon Ball Z Budokai were famous for massive rosters without much of the balancing. The actual combat is a bit predictable, a common problem with anime fighters as well, and once you learn how to dash and use your assist, because Jump Force is actually a team fighter featuring up to 3 playable characters per player inside, that can be tagged in and out as you see fit. The gameplay expands a bit, but not by much. Sure, the variety of characters you can play and mix and match can give the game some life, but the combat itself is not much to write home about, and it's no better than Xenoverse from 4 years prior. Jump Force is much worse than Xenoverse though. Not only does it have the similar copy-paste mission structure that has to be grinded because weapon or item drops are not guaranteed, it doesn't have co-op, so you have to do all of it alone. And the local play is not much better, even if it is included, because the camera doesn't have a priority system and just spins around both of you in a dizzying sense as you both start to move around. Now I've covered a lot of negatives, but I think that there are some positives that I should cover, even if there aren't very many. And that's like the sounds in Jump Force. Everything sounds authentic and like it belongs. The visuals though, they're going to be controversial for most, depending on your character and your taste, because Chunsoft decided to choose a realistic art style to accompany the characters being put into the real world. The graphics are just a bit hit and miss. Sure, the particle effects and power-ups are pretty, even if they do clearly get in the way a bit too much, showing that the gameplay was kind of like a side part and the big focus was more so on the presentation. But like the graphics, the character models themselves are also hit and miss, with some characters just looking quite strange, and others just looking just mid. It really felt like all the effort being put into Jump Force was just on presentation, and even that was rocky at best. Fans and critics were echoing one thing, and one thing in unison. Jump Force felt more like it was a licensed cash grab kind of game than an actually good game. It was just meant to capitalize on the popularity of the IPs it was utilizing more so than just being a good game. And it's hard to debate that narrative, when so much in Jump Force was below the standard for a fighting game. I mean, even the characters themselves weren't that impressive in their peak forms, with transformations existing in Jump Force, sure, but being not only underwhelming but doing very little at all to change the gameplay. This is from a franchise with Shonen in the name, Shonen Jump Weekly, and Shonens without powering up and having uniques was kind of like sacrilegious, am I right, otakus? The population of Jump Force would start at its peak on Steam of just 9,800 players and 3,000 concurrently, but within just 2 months would fall off a cliff to 700 players peak. Jump Force reportedly had fared much better on consoles, where it also managed to sell a lot more there too. The next character DLC pass, also costing $30, would drop May 21st, 2020, following year, introducing 5 new characters including Hei from Yu Yu Hakusho. Jump Force had already started decreasing in its base price, because although it sold relatively well to start at launch, within a year, and honestly less than that, the sales had already started to slow down, and the price reflected that. And worse, whenever people were buying the game, they weren't sticking with it for very long. We don't know exactly what the sales were for Jump Force ultimately, but we know it sold best on PlayStation and on consoles was able to sell a couple of million copies. But how many of those copies were heavily discounted, and what was the budget of this obviously expensive game in the first place? These questions were important ones pertinent to whether or not the game could last or not. This likely gave them the gas that they would need to push on for another platform launch that might have surprised some but was a natural move for most fighting games that would launch everywhere else. The Switch launch would drop August 28, 2020, and I can't find any sales information concerning it, nor any reports of success, likely meaning that there wasn't that much of it. This, alongside a lackluster performance overall and an incredibly expensive licensing deal for a massive 40-character roster, would push Chunsoft and Jump Force to cancel their third DLC sometime during 2021. Although the game launched only 2 years prior, in a shocking statement, instead of doubling down and trying to fix what was there and salvage their game, Bandai Namco announced that they would be stopping support for Jump Force and shutting the servers down just 1 year later. This would make the game unplayable online, and only playable offline to those who already owned the game, since it was set to be delisted from stores as well. Jump Force really failed to do itself any favors beating the allegations about it being a character license cash grab, when as soon as the dust would clear on their launch and sales would seemingly slow down, they would pack up their ball and go home, celebrating their near 5 million copies sold, somehow, most likely though, at discounted rates. It's likely this was a Bandai Namco decision, as they have a history of pulling support quite quickly, especially if they don't see the kind of success that they're looking for. But I can't really blame them in this instance when Chunsoft did a subpar job. Still, I can blame Bandai in the end because they're the ones who tasked a largely amateuristic fighting game developer with making a quite ambitious fighting game. Because that's the thing, you can't just call Jump Force an anime fighter and wash your hands of it saying, well, it's not supposed to be that deep. It had the strength of a massive and well-known character roster that actually also became a weakness, when now you have thousands of eyeballs on you from different mangas all expecting greatness and expecting you to deliver upon it, and then you fail to satisfy whole swaths of anime. So in a sense, them trying to cash out on bringing in all the biggest and baddest characters massively backfired, when expectations started to soar alongside those characters and their storied histories, including in other video games as well. When you start to play with nerddom and otaku level fandoms, you have to be careful, they have big expectations. Before the online servers would be shut down though, there would be a short resurgence of JF fans trying to play the game before it would shut down, which it did on the fateful day of August 24th, 2022, delisted from stores and no longer playable on the online servers. Jump Force in just a short time had jumped and fallen. The music is playing, detectives, and the mystery is coming to an end, but in case you missed any of the clues along the way, why did Jump Force die and find itself on the Death of the Game series? Well, it was all flash and no dash. It had a lackluster story and production, reductive design and bad fundamentals. It was quickly abandoned, expensive and not worth the licensing money. Another title has fallen, detectives, that was big and boisterous in its early approach and announcement, but ultimately unable to keep the fire burning. Jump Force might not be remembered for anything more than, wasn't there a game that used to let you fight as like different anime and manga characters that wasn't Smash Bros? And I don't know if there was ever going to be a different fate for a water cooler conversation for a game that seemed more focused on featuring a bunch of well-known characters, and that was it, than properly utilizing them for a mashup game that could last longer than just 2 years. Look, detectives, I would like to see more than just one mashup fighter or game on the market, but not if this was the kind of effort we were going to see there. And yep, I'm looking at you, Multiverses, which we already covered, and that SpongeBob game, which we will probably also cover. Thanks for watching, detectives, and let me know in the comments below what your experiences were playing Jump Force, and any other cases that you would like to see me cover. Until the next case.
What are you doing here?
Come with me.